Hello, hello. This is an art gripe starring Goku. It is important to note that Toriyama passed away about a week ago from when I'm recording this, so if you're watching this in the future, that is the context. For additional context, I recently released a video called Surviving Super Is Goku Still Goku? And the brief history of that is that I started working on the script for that about a month and a half ago, probably a little bit longer actually, as far as like notes go. And then of course I recorded it, laid it out, and did all the video editing myself. And I'm not a video editor, so it took me a little bit, and by a little bit I mean like about a month to be able to get it all done. Video editing for me is a very tiring, migraine-inducing process. Point being, you can't make a video that's 40 minutes long in one day. And I knew, unfortunately, I was going to release the video on Patreon for, early access purposes on the previous Friday from now. And that was quite unfortunate because his death was announced, I think, late Thursday. So I immediately recognized this is very bad for a variety of reasons. The first being, if I release it now, it can be seen as exploitative or exploitive. So I thought, well, I can just not release it at all, but then people will say that I made this as a response either way. And I thought, well, I can just not release it at all, and which means that it's a month of my life that's been wasted and I produce no content, which is not good for me at all. And I don't think Toriyama would want that either way, especially since there's really nothing wrong with the video. It's not like a glowing recommendation of the series, and it's not really critical of the series either. It's just analyzing Goku's character. But of course it's because it's me, and because it's just Dragon Ball related at all. I knew that people would be critical either way. And of course they were. So I thought, well, I could just wait and release it in like half a year, but I wasn't really wanting to do that either because it just results in the same problems. And you can't release it in like 1 or 2 months because then people assume the same thing, that you're, creating it as a response. So I decided, if anything, I actually have to rush this. Because if I release it immediately, it's extremely clear that I just got through making it, which I had. I had finished creating it about 2 days prior. 1 day before his death was announced late that night. So I thought, I have to rip it down because it was already uploaded. Put like a short intro in front of it and then re-upload it. So I was up late last night. I was up late that night attempting to do that and re-upload it and make sure that I woke up early enough that I could do all the setup required in order to get it out that day. Because I knew that, sure, people were going to be upset that I was releasing it that day as a result, but I don't get a choice in the matter. There was really nothing that I could do about it. I was damned if I did or damned if I did not. So, just brief context as far as that goes. Point being, since that was like a comedy video where I wasn't really being, faithful to my own perspectives, I guess. I don't know how to put it. It's comedy, so I'm taking things out of context sometimes for the sake of a joke and not giving my like 100% earnest opinion on things. It's sort of like that Naruto video. That's the one that I probably get the most... not feedback, it's not constructive. The most opinions on, I guess. I don't really think about the video at all, because I don't really care about Naruto in any way. But every so often I'll see on like my Twitter feed. Apparently at some point I made some tweet about how the video is like a comedy video, and I wasn't taking it too seriously, and some of the opinions in it aren't actually my opinions, which is true. I mean, if you're making a comedy video, that's always going to be the case. The same thing is true with, almost any of my videos that aren't art gripes. Sometimes for the sake of a joke, or sometimes to land a point, you can't go over every last single detail of something. And if you know me, then you know that I'm extremely analytical, and that's one of the reasons why I make videos like this. It's because it allows me to ramble. And whenever I'm writing, one of the reasons why that my videos are so long is because I do a lot of rambling. And I do a lot of rambling because I'm always second-guessing myself and thinking up new ideas, and going over why some things may be true, or why I believe they're true, or punching holes in my own arguments just because I'm curious whether they hold up, or I'm trying to just explore them, and you see where I'm going with this. So, in the case of that Naruto video, or even this Goku video, or any of them, that's what I do. I will sort of be true to what I actually think, because what I think is way too complicated, and it's not even really nailed down. If you ask my opinion on almost anything, it can be kind of frustrating, because most of the time I will say, well, it depends. And then I'll explore a bunch of different options, and I'm not the kind of person that's wishy-washy or will be unable to make up his mind. I eventually will absolutely make up my mind. I can settle on things. But my process of getting there means that I will acknowledge there are lots of things that are not true or questionable about how I reach my decision, and as a result, I am absolutely open to the idea that I'm going to be wrong about them. So, I try to be as open-minded about the possibility of being wrong as possible, although I can be kind of hard-headed sometimes. This is who I am. That's not funny. Whenever you're making a comedy video, it's not funny to listen to that. And whenever you're listening to an art gripe, it's typically not very funny. It's something that might be interesting to listen to, but it's not ha-ha funny. So whenever you're making a video that's supposed to be for comedy, of course you are not going to make something that is going to be completely true to your perspective if you are this analytical and completely beaten down by your own perspectives. Anyways, every so often on Twitter, I'll see people react to that tweet like it's some sort of weird smoking gun, like, aha, we got him. To which I just get confused. Like, haha, he admitted that the video is comedy. Yeah? Is there more to that? I honestly don't get it. Point being, a lot of people they don't have that in them. To them, the world is black and white. Things are absolute good or absolute bad. Even during the video, I pointed out Goku is not a good father or a bad father. And just like I expected, lots of people in the comments were like, he's a terrible father. I'm glad you agree. Like, what do you mean I'm glad I just said that he's not. Like, you actually listened to me say something and then completely ignored it in favor of doing the thing that you wanted to say. It can be very frustrating. Especially since this, as you can probably tell, that's not really me. I don't like being overly critical. I'm just analytical. So especially whenever something like the death of Akira Toriyama rolls around, and I'm in the process of making a comical video where I'm trying to be as one-sided as possible, because the delivery of the joke hinges on me being upset about something and having a strong stance on it, then it's not the perspective that I want people to see. I want something more nuanced. So as a result, knowing all these things, I decided I've got to make an art gripe. It has to be that. So I started thinking about all the things that I could possibly say about him specifically. Like, should I do research on him? As far as where was he raised? How was he brought up? And then I decided, no, I'm not gonna get into another thing where I'm doing some extremely complicated 50-minute long essay thing. I do that sometimes, where I get really bogged down on details. I decided, no, it just has to be me. So to that end, I decided, I'm just going to try to avoid getting too in the weeds about this stuff. So when it comes to Toriyama, I'll just kind of briefly mention, if you didn't know, he apparently died of a brain tumor, which almost no one knew that he had, really. Part of this is Japanese culture, where they try to be respectful of like personal issues. But supposedly he was sick during the pandemic, and a lot of people assumed, it was COVID related, and supposedly it actually wasn't. It was something we didn't understand at the time, and it may have been this. We don't know. And we don't know because Toriyama was a very private man. Not in the sense of he was a very private man, but in the sense of, he was almost like, as far as like perspectives in the West, you could almost describe him as being a boomer in a sense. That might be the best way of looking at it. In the sense that he was very disengaged from the internet, and he even rather famously said that he did not watch the anime. He didn't really... He understood what was going on with it to some degree, but he didn't watch it. He didn't care about it. And that came up... I think recently he accepted like a Lifetime Achievement Anime Award, and he sort of had to apologize for it in the sense of he didn't feel like it was warranted because he doesn't really care that much about anime in the first place. And you'll find a lot of creators are like this, where you'll have writers that don't read, or you'll have, cartoonists that don't watch cartoons in some cases. And it's because that is just the medium for them exploring something that's important to them. And it could be that they don't have time for it. It could be that they just never cared about it in the first place. It just depends. And he was kind of like that in the sense of, and I'm not trying to say don't start doing that he didn't care about, this or that. Point being is that the thing, like his daily life was just that, of doing whatever he did around the house, his personal work, the same stuff that mangakas always do to themselves that shorten their lifespans because it is nightmarish work. And he didn't really engage too much with the things that would be important to the actual fans, which is like being online, watching the show, and so on. The thing that was important to him was the creation process. And for him, that was slightly different than some people might imagine. It just depends from creator to creator. That's what I mean. It kind of reminds me of, I was talking with some friends from like high school a while back, because one of them was saying that he was disappointed that, how to explain this? His father was a semi-famous like guitarist. He like a very talented man. Played with a lot of famous musicians. Not going to get into it. Not important. But he was saying that he found it unfortunate that growing up he did not have the same talent that his father did, or he wasn't talented in the same degree that his father was at something. Not even just music, just something. And of course, coming from an artist background, something that I was thinking about while talking is I don't really get to have much of a typical everyday life. Like for most people, you'll grow up, you'll get married and have a kid or something, and you'll have a kind of typical life where you wake up, go to work, come home, greet your significant other, take care of your children, and so on. Participate in one or two hobbies if you have time, which you may not. And, that's life. You form a community and you kind of grow older and so on. Just, everyday human things. I've never gotten to have that, really. A lot of my life is just waking up, sitting in front of a computer, and then that's it. I don't get to, leave and go to a place and meet new people or talk to people. If I have any interpersonal interactions with anyone whatsoever, it has to be online. Very briefly, sometimes I'll interact with my family, and that is kind of it. It's just one of those things I don't get to have. And that's, it's kind of miserable sometimes. It's one of those things that I've kind of struggled with as I've gotten older and older, is, feel like, I'm running out of time because I never got to build up, like a family or a community around myself. And especially these days, that's even more of a problem, especially in Western cultures, because of, lots of different things not going to get into. But point being, it's harder and harder these days to be able to have interpersonal stuff, and this is one of the things that I go through. And it's one of the things that people that do content online have to go through, because so much of your daily life is just sitting in front of a computer or writing or whatever it happens to be. And it depends on person to person. Some people, their content creation just amounts to someone writes the scripts for them and then they just read them. Some people, I wish I could be that. Some people do content creation like that. So for them, daily life might be not quite as bad. But I was thinking about that, and I told him something that I think was kind of an epiphany to him. And I've mentioned this before, but some people will say, like, I wish I could play the piano, I wish I could, play an instrument in general, I wish I could draw. Like, I wish I had this talent. And something I pointed out to him is, people like expert guitarists, whatever, I never like, because he said, as they say, you have to put the work in. And I vehemently disagreed with that. Not in the sense of he's wrong, but in the sense of it's not about putting the work in. It's that your talent at something is a direct reflection of what you do in your daily life. It's that sort of you are what you eat thing. If someone is a great guitarist, then odds are they wake up and they play guitar. And they play that thing until they nearly go to bed or whatever. And throughout the day, they're thinking about it, they're orienting their whole lives around it, and it may even have like adverse effects on their familial life and so on. Their whole life is dedicated to that particular craft. And when it comes to doing any kind of job, which is why, like, some people will complain, why do people ask what you do is the first question when they meet someone? Is that all we are? And the answer is, yeah, kind of. Because how you earn a living day to day is going to determine how you stay alive, which means that your life is going to orient around something. And presumably you're choosing something to orient your life around, and hopefully it's something that you really love to do. And that's usually going to be something that you actually endorse your entire life into. And for me, that is, like, I didn't necessarily choose this life. I don't want it to seem as though, oh, I just love drawing that much. I don't. I really don't. I don't have, like, a incredibly stressful life. If I could have chosen a slightly different kind of life, I definitely would have. Because I definitely miss the social interaction. I miss being able to run into people. I may have had a much easier life if I had had a more normal life. But anyway, that's not the point. Your expertise in something is a direct reflection of what you do every single day. So when it comes to playing the piano, if you want to play the piano, you're not going to be able to just sit down for an hour every day for like a year and then just learn to play the piano really, really well. Your entire life must be altered in such a way that it completely orients around that one thing. You will have to become absolutely obsessed with it. Which, this is one of those things I actually like about a lot of mangas, as far as like how their power systems work, is there's a lot of them that orient around the idea of will or expertise and things. And I really feel like that is the mangaka speaking from experience, because it really does come down to, like, One Piece is a great example, like hockey and so on. The idea of just becoming so obsessed with something or having such a resolute will that it just becomes manifest and overpowers the things that are around you. Several other power systems work in the same way, and I'm not going to go into it. But that really is a reflection of life, is the more obsessed you are with something, then sure, the greater the reflection of your skill in that thing. So, do you really want to be an expert guitarist? Because if you do, then you're not going to do anything with your life except for that guitar. And that's it. And for me, I would much rather be an expert, an expert father, an expert friend, than an expert in drawing. And, I don't get to have that now. This is one of those things. Be thankful for what you have, certainly. Don't envy people that have extreme skills and things unless they're just weird savants where it just comes naturally. Even then, often savants have other problems that coincide with that. Everything is sort of a loose balance. Sometimes people are born with things and they don't have to try them and it doesn't really adversely affect them. That is rare, though. Most of the time, it is extremely detrimental to your life to be an expert in something. And I'm mentioning that because that is what happens especially with mangakas, the people that draw mangas. Akira Toriyama, supposedly most of his lacks health came from his smoking habits, or that is what the general assumption is. And I don't know if that's true. No one really knows medically exactly what happened to him beyond the fact that he had something wrong with him during the pandemic, and he ended up having a brain tumor, and he died via hemorrhaging resulting from that cerebral hemorrhaging. That's all anyone really knows. Because again, very private man. But certainly what did not help is the fact that if you are a mangaka, your life is the creation of that manga. You have assistants, but there are many stories of people that go into work, they work 12 hours a day. They may not even go home to their family. They just stay at the office and sleep, and then they wake up and they keep working. And then very, very briefly, they have enough time to be able to go drinking with a friend or go home and visit their wife or whatever it happens to be. And to me, the way that it has always been described to me, and it varies from person to person, Tagashi's situation might be different from Oda's or so on. To me, it has always sounded like it is extremely miserable. I'm glad that they have the love for the craft to keep doing it, as far as my personal consumption goes. Like, I'm glad to have them in my life. But it is, my empathy kicks in, and it is extremely dire for them. I wish it was easier. For anything like that, I really wish it was easier for them. Because it does sound just absolutely terrible to be afflicted in that way. Especially with something that you really love to create, but it is absolutely ruining the potential of what else your life could be. And that's just part of it. That's the mess that I got myself into, I suppose. So, whenever I think about, like, Toriyama, I was thinking about how I should lead into this. One of the reasons why I wanted to make sure I did a follow-up is for that empathy. Because I think about lots of people think about all the things I could have done. I haven't accomplished anything, which is pretty ordinary for most people. And it takes different forms. Like I was talking to my friend, for him, he has a family. And sure, his family life was not perfect, as especially everyone these days. No one has a perfect family situation. But for him, it was, of course, like developing some sort of skill. Like something that is like impressive to other people, or impressive to themselves. And I think most people are probably like that, or they envy having some sort of particular skill. But for someone like me, the thing that I envy is like the familial life. Like, I have a girlfriend. I love her very much. We're not physically together because that's one of our barriers. I wish that I had a more typical life in that sense, but that's like one of the things that I don't have. there's too much to go into as far as like trying to explain all that. That element of it is not really important so much as just the fact that you're always, it's a grass is greener sort of thing where you may think my life would be more complete if I had this technical skill. Like if I had the ability to do this, or in my case, if I had more of a prototypical family, like if I had kids by now and stuff like that. It doesn't really fix anything, though. I've been over this, but this is a completely different topic. Happiness in life is going to stem from your self-agency, your ability to reflect on yourself and be able to enjoy what you have, and so on. So, to Akira Toriyama, other mangakas, my perspective on that is that empathy, that desire to make sure that, I don't know, just to like have some reflection on them and realize, oh, they had a good life. Or they didn't give up too much, or they loved what they were doing. It's just that sort of that thought that goes through my head. Like, I really hope that he had an exceptional life, and I think that he did. But of course, his life is very private, so we have no idea, really. And especially with Japanese culture, you never quite know, because so much of that is suppressed in some way. Anyways, point being, as far as the writing of this, or the creation of this drawing goes, I decided that's what's going to be important. It's just talking off the cuff, talking about my personal experiences, and focusing more on that as opposed to like the nitty-gritty details of what happened to him, what his life was like, and so on. That said, my personal history with Dragon Ball goes back quite a ways. Part of the reason why I got into drawing in the first place was specifically because of Dragon Ball. Whenever I was younger, in my teens, even pre-teens and so on, I didn't really draw that much. And in fact, I really didn't draw that much until probably my late 30s. Like, before then, I would just kind of doodle things on notebook paper, and usually they were just... Usually I just drew character designs. Like a character standing, full quarter, like a 4x4. In other words, not a bust shot, not a torso shot, like the whole character. And I would just draw a character just standing there, because I like designing like the outfits and, their hair designs and stuff like that. And I like coming up with characters, because I was more about imagination and writing as opposed to drawing. I always sort of liked drawing. It was a nice little pastime that I was never serious about it. And you can tell because I'm not like an amazing artist. I'm alright. By my own expectations. But like this drawing, for example, took me 12 and a half hours. And it took me 12 and a half hours because, one, I don't draw much Dragon Ball related things, so I wasn't really used to drawing the character. And I am not practiced enough because my every waking hour is not devoted to drawing, like I was saying. I don't want to be the expert guitarist. I don't want to be the expert artist that does photorealism and wakes up and every waking mode is completely devoted to nothing but drawing and everything hinges on that. And if people stop hiring me for commissions or whatever, then I go hungry. And I have to end up working at Walmart or something. I don't like that. I don't want that. I've always been more of a jack of all trades, and everything I do is sort of a mishmash of different interests and things that sort of coincidentally collide with one another. I kind of wish it was one way or the other with me, because I'm kind of getting the worst of both worlds in a sense, where I have to completely dedicate most of my personal time in life to doing something, despite the fact that I'm not completely obsessed with it. So I feel like it might be better if I was completely obsessed with it to the point where that was the only thing that I wanted to do, or if it was the inverse where I just didn't have the skill set at all and I just lived an ordinary life. I don't know. Anyways, But whenever I was younger, my first experience with Dragon Ball was sitting down in the kitchen in front of this little crummy TV set that my mother used whenever she was making food. It was in color. The one before that was not in color. And this one, actually, later on, I would go on to salvage, because they wanted to throw it out, and I picked it up out of the trash, and I had to rewire it in order to get it to work again. But on that little crummy TV, which, if you hold out your thumbs and try to make like a box shape using your hands, like half of a box, it was probably about that size. It's very small. On network television, air-to-air television, like over the airways from an antenna, one of those sets that people don't use anymore. Because we never had cable. I never had that stuff. There was a television station that I learned later, this is unusual, it actually was airing Dragon Ball Z. Which was strange because it seems like it was airing at very specific cities about a year or two before it hit, whatever it's called, syndication? I don't know. But widespread airing via Funimation, or whoever it was at the time, across the rest of the United States. And this was way, way before Toonami. That didn't exist yet. This is like 96 or something. I forget the exact year. But my first experience was tuning into a random episode of Gohan in the wilderness during the start of the Saiyan saga. And he was walking past a rock, and he tested his strength by punching the rock. And I mentioned this before. And of course the rock shatters after he walks away, but he doesn't realize that he had broken it, so he thinks, oh, I have a long way to go. But I remember that was my first time seeing it. And later I would go on to like have further experiences like acquiring things like tapes. That was a big thing at the time. You could get Dragon Ball stuff, but things were like trafficked in hushed whispers about, oh, there's this series in Japan called GT. I'm like, GT? What the hell's that? Like, there's this thing called Super Saiyan 4. And people just assume that you were lying. Because around that time, like, Toonami had just started, and for the longest time, it was really hard to find anything that had moved past the point, and you guys will know what I'm talking about if you know anything about having watched it during this era. The point where Goku gets to Namek, and the series just sort of stopped, because there was some sort of, I forget what the legal problem was, but they had not gotten the okay to continue dubbing it or something. It's been years since I thought about this. People that are more experts on the background would know about this instantly. But it took a long time for there to be an actual, like, funding in order to get a proper continuation of that original dub, and I think it was the Ocean dub that was televised at the time. And after that, it switched over to the Funimation dub that everyone is used to today. And there was a stark shift afterwards, but there was like this really long waiting period where just no one knew anything about the series past that point. And I remember someone describing to me in like a old Yahoo chat room that Goku got something called Super Saiyan, and it was sort of like Kaioken, or Kaioken as we called it back then, in the days. It was a style at the time. It was sort of like Kaioken, except it just lasted forever, and his hair turned gold instead of him having a red aura. And I remember explaining that to other kids, and they're like, What are you talking about? It's just this weird time where no one knew anything about the series, and it was really hard to find any information on it, because most people did not have the internet, because that was just... The internet was not new, it had been around since like even the late 60s in a sense, of wiring computers together. But as like a widespread service across the United States, it wasn't really much of a thing until the mid and late 90s. And even up until like the 2000s, it was still a little bit wonky. So just weird era. And like a lot of people, I got kind of obsessed with it. for a little while. All my like fiction and stuff sort of started taking on weird tones and stuff. I was one of those kids. Something that I mentioned in the start of that Goku video I just released, and something I wanted to expand on a little bit, was me mentioning how one of the reasons why Dragon Ball is so popular is specifically because it has flaws, and it is, in a way, very generic, because it's just a show about, characters just fighting each other. And then ever so often you get like a little tinge of character development, but it doesn't really go many places because it's not Toriyama. And that's one of the most interesting things about it to me, because people sort of hunger for that stuff, so whenever they don't get it, they have to sort of create it on their own. And because Dragon Ball is sort of a generic show in a lot of senses, it's easy to project onto, and it's easy to criticize it and to try to explore ways that you would quote-unquote fix it, and so on. There's a video I did where I was talking about the ending of Team 4 Star's Dragon Ball Bridge, like them wrapping up their commentary on it, and I just had thoughts on their series in general. And I talked about the concept of fan-fixing, and which is very prevalent in Dragon Ball, because there are so many people that's like, oh, Gohan should have been the main character, or Goku should have been less dumb and super, and it's whatever happens to be. There's tons of things. It's very pervasive in Dragon Ball, because it's really easy to project yourself onto it. With the Gohan should have been the main character people, you can always tell, like, as soon as someone says something like that, I instantly know their age, I know how they access Dragon Ball, and I know what age they are now. And typically I can guess what their daily lives are like, and probably even sometimes their location, where they come from, and so on. Just because, like, it's obvious they're projecting onto Gohan, because they were probably, 9 to 14 during the era in which the Cell Saga came out, specifically on Toonami, and so on. So you can just instantly make a lot of assumptions about people. It's not always true. Not gonna typecast everyone. But point being, like, I did my Gohan video, Gohan's Many Masks, and I came up with this concept of comfort branding. And I had to come up with that concept specifically because there's lots of things that are sort of relative to that, but they're not the same thing as projecting onto something as part of your formative development and that becoming something that is relative to a specific aspect of some kind of marketing and brand consumption. Lots of people like to try to correct me of that, and I always find a hole in it. It's like, well, no, that's just nostalgia, or no, that's this other thing. Point being, it's really common with Dragon Ball. People will comfort brand to one specific aspect of a character or so on, and it's so easy to construct new narratives and project fanfiction or headcanons onto this series because there's just not that much there. Like with Goku's characterization with the Zenzu being tossed in Gohan and so on. I was talking about in that video how, of course, it was not a wise thing to do. It wasn't. I can question that, and I could spend here all day sitting here and second-guessing myself, as I love to do. And even in the video I said I could make arguments either way, and I can, but in general I think that was not a wise thing to do. But even in the comments, I got some people, like, I guess they think they're correcting me? I don't know. Where they say, no, it wasn't a mistake that Goku did that because he loves his son so much and he had faith in him. Which, to me, sounds insane. But putting that to the side, you can tell that there's a lot of projection and assumptions that go into how people perceive the characterization of things. And often it comes down to, I loved that moment, therefore nothing from it can be an error. And anytime that this goes for the Naruto video, it goes for Dragon Ball, it goes for pretty much anything. that I've made, the Hunter x Hunter video as well. If I'm critical of any branding, I'm always going to anticipate there being someone that is really, really irrationally upset about something and will go out of their way to try to... Usually whenever I get criticisms, it's people that try to pretend that they know something that I don't. Like they'll say, oh, you're wrong about this. You're so wrong. Haha, I'm so above you. You know, just trying to create the illusion that they are way above me, so far beyond me as far as their own perceptions of something and their own righteousness and rightness about something, that they don't have to bother explaining it. That way they can walk away and feel like they won an argument that they didn't have. You know, those kinds of people. And then there's other people that will try to make arguments, but they don't make any sense. Like they start, like they're not grounded in any form of logic. And it's like that. The whole Goku did a good thing because he loved his kid. So him abusing his kid was good because he loves Gohan, and he had good motivations, therefore it's good. But it really just comes down to, I love that moment, therefore it cannot have errors. It cannot be wrong. And I point that out because this sort of happened with the announcement of Akira Toriyama's death as well. People do this. They sometimes after someone dies, and usually it makes more sense if it's like a loved one or something, they will pretend that they never did anything wrong for the longest time, and they were perfect. It is wrong to say anything even remotely wrong about them. Like I remember the opening the video, I said he wasn't the perfect creator, and I didn't even like say it with any stank to it. It says he wasn't the perfect creator, and I even mentioned I'm not either. Maybe I should have added no one is, or I don't know. But even I had at least one person respond, how fucking dare you say that he wasn't the perfect creator? Like, what more do you want? Like, it's insane the lengths some people go. But yeah, some people are like that, where they just can't process things outside of binary attitudes. And that's one of the things I've always liked about Toriyama, is the fact that he is not perfect. It's one of the things I love about Dragon Ball, is that it's so easy to project onto. And if you want to have more of my opinions on like fan fixing and stuff like that, you can go watch that video. It's the Android 16 one. Here we are, I'm finishing up. I didn't want to go too long. I could have really over-rendered this, but I'd already been working on it 12 and a half hours. And by the way, I didn't even mention this. This is the motorcycle is loosely modeled after an FTR 2020. Because I was thinking, what could I do that's like related to Toriyama? Because I don't want to have like another thing like Goku with a halo above his head flying away, or him getting to heaven or being greeted by King Yama or something like that. Everyone's done that. I decided, you know what? I'm going to do something that I don't want to do, because I knew this is one of the things I like about Toriyama. He was obsessed with certain things. Like he really loved Terminator, which is obvious by the Cell Saga. And he really loved machinery. He loved drawing machinery, which is one of those things that some people don't really know. If you look at a lot of his cover art, then you definitely notice it. But I decided, you know what? I'm going to do that, because I hate drawing machinery. I hate doing it. It drives me insane. Because I don't like drawing things that are inorganic, because it means that you can't make mistakes. Everything has to be perfect. So I decided to look for something that sort of looked not steampunkish, that has that sort of aesthetic of Dragon Ball, in the sense of the type of things that he might draw that I could translate into my own style without too much of a worry. Because I decided I'm not going to try to draw something in his style exactly, because I can't. And that will require too much time to be able to get used to it and so on. So I decided to look for something that had like a lot of piping to it, that looked more of old-fashioned without actually being old. And the Indian FTR 2020, I think, was designed specifically to invoke that sort of aesthetic. So I decided to do something that was sort of loosely based on it. So it's not the exact same thing. I'm sure people that actually know motorcycles are probably looking at this going, what the fuck is that? That would never run. What is this? But That's, not the point. Looking at his drawings too, I realized, he didn't really draw things realistically either, as far as his machinery goes. He just liked to draw machinery. He has that same thing that I had back in high school, where I just like drawing things connecting to each other and making it look, just cool looking. And again, that's what I loved about Toriyama, is that it's kind of refreshing. Like all these things that I'm talking about, all my worries about, family and art styles and just so he just lived. And his manga was the same way. Is all the things that he did. I don't know how someone's going to follow up and continue making Dragonball. That kind of worries me, because we saw what happened with like GT. Like they just can't do it, and even Super to some degree. And Toritaro doesn't really write the same way either. But his foundation for why he did things was he wanted to have fun. He liked drawing the poo-poo on a stick gag. So much of Dragon Ball was originally just the fun of this whippersnapper Goku that doesn't understand how people are, walking around peeing in public, eating people to bankruptcy, and so on. That was the joke. And Akira Toriyama was making it because he thought it was funny. It was fun. And part of the reasons why mangaka are the way that they are is because that's what they like to do. And it's one of the reasons why I feel bad for like Hunter x Hunter, because it's probably not going to get done because of the state of his health. Takashi just can't really, do anything about it. And he's like trapped in that sense. But as far as Toriyama is concerned, he has that. He has that love of just drawing to draw. And when it comes to his writing, sure, he would listen to people. He was Goku in a sense of being told, well, you shouldn't do this, and him not exactly understanding why in some cases, but being like, okay, well, I get it. I'll go with that. Which is how you get like cell situations where it starts with 2 androids, becomes 4 androids, then keeps going until you get the cell and so on, which was never even planned because of the internal criticisms he was getting from his editors. And he got that because he just liked to draw. And he liked making the content. And the more serious it got, the less engaged he got with it. And which is kind of good that, so much of it started getting taken over by Toei and, during Super's development, is because once more of it got out of his hands and he could resort to just doing bullet points, then he got back into it. Because you can tell his priorities were he wanted to have fun. And that's the openness to Dragon Ball, its incompleteness, is part of the reason why it's so easy to step into it and start trying to fix it in ways that it doesn't need fixing. And that itself is what helps to inspire so many other creators to go, oh, I like the ideas, these incomplete ideas. I'm going to use them, and I'm going to put these in my own world. Because I'm not going to be able to write fanfiction of Dragon Ball, but I can do this. And to me, that's the biggest credit you can give an artist, is whenever it's not necessarily that their work is great, it's that because so many people consume something and then they're done with it. It's disposed of. And even if they acknowledge it as being great, that's where it ends for them. Some of the greatest content is whenever people experience something and it persists in their life in such a way that it actually alters how they think and how they create. And that's why, like, Dragon Ball is considered to be the grandfather of all shonen. And in a lot of ways, like, I think it's still the most profitable manga of all time and continues to be year to year in some respects. I'm sure One Piece is overtaken in many regards. Because it is incomplete and generic in some respects. And I kind of hope that I do that same thing. Like, there's so many errors looking at this drawing. I don't even want to look at it anymore. But I just hope the fact that in my rambling, incoherent thoughts and in my wild scribblings, you can look at it and come up with your own ideas, because they are incomplete. And that inspiration to me is way more important than actually producing something that is finalized. I would much rather have a lifetime of connecting with you guys and inspiring you to do your own things, as opposed to making like one like scary lessons game where you experience it, go, oh, that was good, and then move on from it. And as a creator, that's what I hope everyone aspires to do, is to be able to connect with people. It's like, I always think of Patrick Stewart eventually reconnecting with Star Trek. Like, originally he hated being on the show, and he, I think he saw it as being like beneath him in some ways, or he was too serious about it. But lots of people are, like, famous actors come around in that regard as well, where they're very serious about their work and they regret, oh, I did all these amazing things for theater, but no one knows about them, and they only care about this one silly little character I did for this show somewhere. But that's the thing that people connect with the most. And that's what really matters, is whether or not people can actually interface with something and project themselves onto it and find out more about themselves via experiencing it, in such a way that it carries over to every other aspect of their life. Like, what is more important than that? To me, it's nothing. So for all my little quibblings and criticisms of Dragon Ball, it's content, and I'm able to make that content because I'm able to project myself onto it. So much of my younger life was oriented around Dragon Ball. Not just because of the silly little fights, but because little young asshole me, who was like just such a little edgelord that was just critical of everything. Everything was just so beneath younger Eli. Was able to just sit there and go, oh, well, that would never happen. It was silly of this character to do this. I can't believe the writer did this. That's part of the fun. Being able to just sit around and criticize something. That's why I love being around people that are able to criticize things with me. Not necessarily because we're angry at the product, but because we enjoy watching it, and it's fun to like nitpick at the thing while still acknowledging this is great. And not many people are like that, I understand. But it's one of the things that I personally love about Dragon Ball. That's why I make the things that I make. Anyways, there were so many other things I planned to talk about. I really wanted to... I hope I got the impression down. I really wanted to communicate how much I actually really love Dragon Ball, and how much I really appreciate about the man. I don't really get mopey and emotional about things, which is part of why some people got really upset, because some people are just like directly emotional. And I'm sure that for them, experiencing Toriyama dying is like the realization of, oh, Dragon Ball can't go on for forever. And that in turn probably like hits them in a way where they think, does that mean Dragon Ball is ending? Does that mean that Dragon Ball is dead? Does that mean that my like childhood experiences with it, all the positive feelings that I have associated with it, are like going away as well? Like, there's probably lots of ambiguous sort of thoughts that go on with people that they don't analyze in 100% of cases. Because not everyone's like an analytical weirdo like me that just sits around thinking constantly. So I get where that stuff comes from. So I definitely get the emotional response. And sometimes it is also like purely logical while also being emotional at the same time. Some people are like that as well. So I get it. This meant a lot to a lot of people. If you want to understand that, go watch all the videos online of people in Mexico and Colombia and Ecuador and all these like Latin America, South American countries where they're illegally watching this huge widescreen presentation of the end of Dragon Ball Super in the streets as people are losing their minds cheering the characters during the finale of the series. This meant a lot to a lot of people. And it means a lot to a lot of people specifically because of what Akira Toriyama was. And he wasn't like this brilliant mastermind. He was a guy that just loved doing what he did, and he kept doing it until he died. And unfortunately, him doing it for the love of doing it may have contributed to that, because of just the health conditions that go along with being a mangaka. Smoking or not smoking aside. But anyways, hope you guys enjoyed this video. I wanted to make sure that I had like a quote-unquote real video where I actually talked about my love for the series and my actual like stream of consciousness thoughts about it, as opposed to something that was originally formatted and presented. So I hope that communicated well enough. I really did really appreciate the man, and I hope that comes through with my work as well. And I know for most of you, you do recognize that, and for people that are just like haters in the sense that they'll just leave an angry comment or tweet about it and try to bring in people to download the video or whatever. I don't give a damn about them. They may as well just not even exist. Because they're not actually watching the video. They don't know me. They don't know anything. They're just reacting because some people are ethical predators. They'll sit around waiting on something like this to happen so that they can jump in and feel good about themselves being morally righteous. People like that exist too. But anyways, ignore the haters. Don't worry about them. Enjoy the content in the way that you feel most satisfied doing. That is what is important. Glean what you can from the experiences that you have and carry that forward to the next generation of people. That is what is important. All right. But thank you very much for watching. I'll see you guys next time. Bye-bye.